Imagine waking up in one of the wealthiest black communities in America, walking past luxury hotels, elegant theaters, successful banks, doctors, lawyers, business owners, families living what many believed was the American dream. Now imagine, less than 24 hours later, much of that same community lies in ashes. How could one of America's greatest success stories become one of its greatest tragedies? And why was it absent from so many classrooms for decades? Tonight, we begin uncovering the rise of Greenwood, known as Black Wall Street, and the hidden history behind one of the darkest chapters in American history. Before we dive deeply, kindly subscribe to my page, follow, like, and share for more hidden history, untold stories, and fascinating historical mysteries. At the beginning of the 20th century, Tulsa, Oklahoma, was changing rapidly. Oil discoveries brought enormous wealth to the region. New businesses appeared. Railroads connected communities. The city expanded almost overnight. But opportunity was not shared equally. Segregation shaped daily life. Black and white residents often lived in separate neighborhoods, attended separate schools, and used separate public facilities under the laws and customs of the era. Despite these barriers, a remarkable community began to grow north of the railroad tracks. Its name was Greenwood. Greenwood did not become prosperous by accident. It was built through determination, entrepreneurship, and community investment. One of the area's early developers, O.W. Gurley, purchased land and encouraged black-owned businesses to establish themselves there. Other entrepreneurs followed. Soon, Greenwood became home to grocery stores, pharmacies, restaurants, barbershops, beauty salons, hotels, newspapers, churches, schools, and professional offices. Money circulated within the community as residents supported local businesses. Teachers educated the next generation. Doctors cared for patients. Lawyers represented clients. Business owners reinvested in their neighborhood. The result was extraordinary. By the early 1920s, Greenwood had become one of the most prosperous black communities in the United States. Journalists and residents began referring to it as Black Wall Street. Greenwood was more than a business district. It was a thriving community. Children walked to school each morning. Families attended church together. Neighbors gathered at restaurants and theaters. The neighborhood featured elegant homes alongside successful businesses. The Dreamland Theater attracted moviegoers. The Stratford Hotel was one of the largest black-owned hotels in the country. Professionals built successful careers. Musicians entertained packed audiences. Newspapers reported local achievements. For many residents, Greenwood represented something powerful. Proof that success was possible despite discrimination and legal segregation. History often remembers buildings, but communities are built by people. There were educators determined to prepare children for brighter futures. Entrepreneurs willing to risk everything to open businesses. Families who saved for years to buy homes. Church leaders who strengthened community ties. Doctors who served patients regardless of income. Many residents had arrived in Oklahoma seeking opportunity after Reconstruction and during the broader movement of African Americans searching for greater economic independence. Greenwood became a symbol of what could be achieved through resilience, education, and enterprise. To understand Greenwood, we must understand America in 1921. The nation was experiencing economic change after World War I. Returning veterans sought jobs. Racial tensions existed in many parts of the country. Violence against black communities occurred in multiple cities during what historians call the Red Summer of 1919, leaving deep scars and widespread fear. Oklahoma itself had experienced rapid growth fueled by oil wealth. Prosperity existed alongside inequality. Segregation remained firmly entrenched. Many black veterans returned from military service believing they had earned greater equality through their service to the country. Instead, many encountered continuing discrimination. This broader national context formed part of the environment in which Tulsa's tragedy would unfold. Greenwood's prosperity became widely known. Visitors admired its businesses. Newspapers described its commercial success. Residents took pride in what they had built. Yet success sometimes attracted resentment. Historians note that racial prejudice, economic competition, and segregation all contributed to growing tensions in Tulsa. No single factor explains what happened next. Instead, a combination of long-standing social conditions created an increasingly fragile situation. For many years, countless Americans never learned about Greenwood in school. The achievements of Black Wall Street and its destruction received little attention in many history textbooks for decades. Beginning in the late 20th century, historians, educators, journalists, survivors, and community advocates worked to bring renewed attention to these events. Research expanded. Official investigations were conducted. Historical markers were installed. Museums and educational programs helped preserve the memory of Greenwood and those who lived there. The story, once overlooked by many, gradually became better known. One of the most frequently repeated claims is that the Tulsa Race Massacre was deliberately erased from American history. What do historians say? Most historians agree that for many decades the event received limited attention in numerous textbooks and public discussions, particularly outside Oklahoma. Scholars point to multiple reasons, including local silence, trauma among survivors, limited official acknowledgement, and broader patterns in how difficult chapters of history were taught. Over time, however, historical research, survivor testimony, journalism, and public interest have significantly increased awareness of the massacre. The reasons for that earlier silence remain an important subject of historical study. Then came Memorial Day weekend, May 1921. An ordinary day. People went to work. Children played. Businesses welcomed customers. No one knew that within days, Greenwood would face one of the most devastating acts of racial violence in American history. And it all began with an encounter inside an elevator. History often remembers the destruction of Black Wall Street. But before the tragedy, there was extraordinary success. Understanding what Greenwood was, and what its residents built, is essential to understanding why its loss had such profound consequences. The story is not only about violence. It is also about achievement, resilience, and community. Today, visitors can walk through the Greenwood district and learn about the people who transformed a segregated neighborhood into one of America's most remarkable centers of Black entrepreneurship. Their story deserves to be remembered not only for how it ended, but for how it began. Because before there was tragedy, there was hope. But one unanswered question remains. How could a single incident inside an elevator, an encounter involving two young people, become the spark that ignited one of the deadliest episodes of racial violence in American history? Memorial Day, 1921. It was Memorial Day in Tulsa. The city was busy. Families celebrated the holiday. Businesses welcomed customers. Workers filled the downtown streets. Among them was Dick Rowland, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner. Because segregation limited which public facilities Black residents could use, Rowland is believed to have used a restroom located on an upper floor of the Drexel building. To reach it, he entered an elevator operated by Sarah Page, a 17-year-old white elevator attendant. What happened next remains one of the most debated moments in the story. No camera recorded the encounter. No complete transcript exists. The surviving historical record is incomplete. What historians generally agree on is this. At some point inside or near the elevator, Sarah Page cried out. A nearby clerk heard the scream. Dick Rowland quickly left the building. Police were notified. Beyond those basic facts, uncertainty remains. Some historians believe Rowland may have stumbled and accidentally grabbed Page to steady himself. Others suggest another accidental misunderstanding. Importantly, Sarah Page did not publicly testify that Rowland assaulted her, and prosecutors later declined to pursue the case. Because of the limited evidence, historians caution against presenting any single explanation as certain. The exact events inside that elevator may never be fully known. The next morning, Tulsa police located Dick Rowland and arrested him. He was taken to the courthouse. Officials placed him on an upper floor, partly out of concern that an angry crowd might attempt to seize him. At first, the situation remained relatively calm. But outside the courthouse, rumors began spreading rapidly. In 1921, there was no internet. No television. No social media. News traveled through conversations, telephone calls, and newspapers. Rumors often spread faster than verified information. Some claimed Rowland had committed a violent assault. Others predicted that a lynching was imminent. Fear grew. Anger spread. Within hours, crowds began gathering near the courthouse. Many people had little reliable information. Yet emotions continued rising. One Tulsa newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune, published an article about the arrest. The original edition is no longer known to survive in full, and historians continue to debate aspects of its content. Many researchers believe the reporting contributed to rising public tensions. Some historical accounts also refer to an editorial that allegedly encouraged action against Rowland. Because no confirmed copy of that editorial has been found, historians disagree about its exact wording and even whether it appeared as later described. What is well documented is that newspaper coverage, and the rumors circulating alongside it, helped intensify an already volatile atmosphere. As evening approached, the crowd outside the courthouse grew larger. Some white residents reportedly feared Rowland might escape justice. At the same time, members of Tulsa's black community became increasingly concerned that he could be lynched. Their fears were not unfounded. Lynchings had occurred in other parts of the United States during this period, and many black veterans and community leaders believed they had a duty to help prevent another tragedy. A small group of armed black men, including several military veterans, went to the courthouse and offered assistance to the sheriff in protecting Rowland. The sheriff declined, believing he could maintain order. The group left. But the situation continued to deteriorate. Later that evening, a larger group of armed black residents returned to the courthouse. Their intention, according to many historical accounts, was again to help prevent a lynching. Meanwhile, the white crowd had also grown. The atmosphere was tense, nervous, unpredictable. People shouted. Arguments broke out. Everything changed. Exactly who fired the first shot remains unknown. Multiple eyewitnesses gave conflicting accounts. No definitive historical evidence has identified the person responsible. What historians agree on is this. Once the first gunshot rang out, chaos followed almost immediately. Gunfire erupted. People ran. Others took cover. Several individuals were killed or wounded within minutes. The confrontation outside the courthouse quickly spread beyond the immediate area. The city had crossed a point of no return. For years, many people believed the violence was the result of one isolated misunderstanding. Modern historians paint a more complex picture. The elevator incident was the spark, but the conditions that allowed violence to spread had been building for years. Segregation, racial discrimination, economic inequality, rumors, recent national racial violence. All of these factors formed the backdrop to the events of May 31, 1921. History rarely has a single cause. The tragedy in Tulsa was no exception. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't what happened inside the elevator. It is how quickly rumor overwhelmed evidence. Within hours, uncertainty became certainty in the minds of many. Fear replaced facts. Assumptions replaced investigation. And one unresolved incident became the catalyst for catastrophe. Night settled over Tulsa. The courthouse remained surrounded. Families locked their doors. Business owners worried about what morning would bring. Many hoped the violence would end before it truly began. They were wrong. The worst was still ahead. Before sunrise, armed groups would move toward Greenwood. Homes would burn. Businesses would be destroyed. Thousands of residents would flee for their lives. And one of the most prosperous black communities in America would face devastation on a scale few could have imagined. But one question still divides historians today. Could this tragedy have been prevented if rumors had been stopped before they spread? The Tulsa Race Massacre. The first gunshot had been fired. Outside the Tulsa courthouse. Fear replaced reason. Rumors spread faster than facts. Within minutes, what had begun as a tense confrontation was becoming something far more devastating. By sunrise, one of America's most prosperous black communities would be transformed forever. As the confrontation broke apart, Armed groups moved through Tulsa's streets. Gunfire echoed across downtown. News spread rapidly that violence had erupted. Many Greenwood residents hurried home to protect their families. Others gathered to defend their neighborhood, uncertain how large the threat had become. Throughout the night, confusion and fear intensified. No one knew how far the violence would spread. During the early hours of June 1, 1921, large groups of armed white residents entered the Greenwood district. Buildings were broken into. Businesses were looted. Fires were deliberately set. Block after block began burning. Families fled with only what they could carry. Some hid in fields and ravines. Others escaped across railroad tracks or sought shelter wherever they could find it. The thriving streets that had symbolized Black success were rapidly disappearing beneath smoke and flames. Survivors later described scenes they never forgot. Parents searched desperately for children. Neighbors helped one another escape burning homes. Business owners watched years of work vanish in a single night. Many remembered the sound of breaking glass, gunfire, and buildings collapsing into the flames. Although every personal account differs, together they paint a consistent picture of widespread destruction and terror. These testimonies have become some of the most important historical evidence for understanding what happened. One of the most discussed aspects of the massacre involves airplanes. Multiple eyewitnesses reported seeing aircraft flying over Greenwood. Some survivors stated they believed shots were fired from planes or that incendiary materials were dropped. What do historians say? Researchers generally agree that aircraft were present over Tulsa during the violence. However, historians continue to debate exactly how they were used. Some evidence suggests planes were used primarily for observation. Other eyewitness accounts describe more direct involvement. Because documentary evidence is limited, the full extent of aerial activity remains an active subject of historical research. By the end of the violence, Greenwood had suffered catastrophic destruction. Historical investigations estimate that more than 1,200 homes and numerous businesses, churches, schools, and community buildings were destroyed. Thousands of residents were left homeless. The exact number of people killed remains uncertain. Early official reports listed relatively low figures, but modern historians generally believe the true death toll was significantly higher. Many scholars estimate that as many as 300 people may have died, though the precise number has never been conclusively established. That uncertainty remains one of the enduring tragedies of the massacre. When the violence ended, many survivors faced another hardship. Thousands were displaced. Some were temporarily held at detention centers until authorities released them. Families searched for missing relatives. Many had lost their homes, businesses, savings, and personal belongings. Yet even amid overwhelming loss, Greenwood's residents began helping one another almost immediately. Community leaders organized relief. Churches offered support. Neighbors shared food, clothing, and shelter. The determination that had built Black Wall Street did not disappear with the flames. For decades, questions persisted about people who were never accounted for. Were there additional victims whose resting places were never identified? In recent years, archaeologists and forensic experts have conducted investigations into possible mass graves connected to the massacre. These investigations have uncovered evidence that continues to be studied. Research is ongoing, and historians emphasize that conclusions must be based on careful archaeological and forensic analysis rather than speculation. The search itself demonstrates that some questions from 1921 remain unanswered. The destruction of Greenwood was not simply the loss of buildings. It was the destruction of accumulated wealth, businesses, community institutions, and generations of opportunity. Black Wall Street represented decades of determination. In little more than a day, much of that achievement had been reduced to ashes. Yet the story did not end there. Many survivors chose to rebuild. As smoke cleared over Tulsa, the world that Greenwood residents had created seemed almost unrecognizable. But history would remember more than destruction. It would remember resilience. Even after unimaginable loss, many survivors refused to surrender their future. That decision would shape the next chapter of this remarkable story. The violence had ended. But another battle was only beginning. Would the survivors receive justice? Would insurance companies honor their claims? Would those responsible be held accountable? Or would one of America's greatest tragedies disappear into silence for generations? To be continued in the final episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to my page, follow, like, and share for more hidden history, untold stories, and fascinating historical mysteries.